Hello, my name is Jonathan Clark, also known as djbolivia, and this is the companion tutorial to another video I have online. This one is basically about beat mixing on vinyl, on turntables. The companion video is a bit bigger. This one is it's a relatively short video that specifically talks about some of the aspects of using vinyl. The other video was called Beat Mixing on CD players, and that one is a lot more comprehensive, kind of gives all the background and the theory behind beat mixing. I'm not going to repeat all that in this video, there's no point doing that twice. So if you haven't watched that other video first, go do so right now. I'll put the link here on the YouTube screen. But if you've already seen that other video and you are curious about the specifics of vinyl, let's get to work. Alright, so we're going to open up some new needles today, the Shore White Labels. I actually started off, when I started DJing a long time ago, I usually used Stanton Trackmasters and Groove Masters, and then I kind of moved over to the Shore M35X, and also the Shore M44-7, although the 44-7 is more of a turntablist needle, and I'm not a scratch DJ, so that wasn't necessarily the most appropriate needle, but we're going to try these out today. And you can see that it is a combination head shell and cartridge and needle all together. Sometimes, like with the Shore M44-7 and 35X, the head shell was a separate piece of equipment, and you would attach your cartridge and the needle to it. And so sometimes people bought a replacement cartridge with a needle, or you could buy just the needle itself, just the stylus. Anyway, this is kind of an all-in-one unit, and we'll play with it today and see how it goes. So you may wonder how you're supposed to balance your tone arm. Basically, first make sure you've got a protector on your needle so that you don't scratch it. Now, take it off. Make sure your cartridge and head shell and everything's on your tone arm, and then spin the thing around until you get a point where it's floating. It's almost perfectly balanced. Okay, so right about there. Now, in the manual for these particular cartridges, it says most commonly you would use a weight of 2.5 to 3.5 grams on the tone arm. So what I do, I'm going to go in the middle of that range with 3. So you look at whatever number happens to be on this. It just kind of goes around in a circle. Anyway, right now I'm at 2. So if I'm going to add 3, I have to go up to 5. So 2, up to 3, up to 4, and actually it comes back to 0 here, but just pretend that's 4, and then another gram up to 1. Okay, and so it's got a little bit of weight, so it'll sit on the record. And that's how you want to balance your tone arm. Alright, so let me take you on a quick tour of this turntable so that you understand what it is. I'm working with let's work on this one. I'm working with a Technics SL1200. It's the M3D version that I've got. And the difference between an M3D and some of the other models, the M3D is a little bit more recent. You can see that when I move this pitch fader up and down through the center point, there's no sudden click or resistance. An earlier model of these, called the MK2, had a little divot in the center, so as it was smooth until you hit the center, and then there was a little click, very similar to the divot that you get in the center of the pan pots on this DJM 600 mixer. Anyway, so if you don't like that, a lot of DJs didn't like that. They wanted to have a smooth passageway through the 0 point. Which really helps your accuracy too if you're mixing very, very close to 0, like from minus 0.2 to plus 0.2. So a lot of DJs actually have taken their pitch faders out of their old MK2s and put in a pitch fader from an M3D to give them the smooth ride through the center point. And I've got a video on YouTube right now that Fred Bisnet helped me with, where he shows how to swap out a pitch fader, mod a pitch fader. Anyway, so this is your pitch fader control. This reset button, if you are at any speed other than 0 and you hit reset, the light will come on, and basically it puts your speed back to 0, as if your pitch fader's not it just deactivates the pitch fader. Okay, on the okay, let's look on this side. You can see a little lock button there. If you can undo that lock, you can twist this thing to raise or lower the entire tone arm assembly. Okay, and what I usually do is I pick a point between the center of the tone arm base tower and the center of the platter, and I set it to about 2. That's the height I like. Personal preference. And then I'll lock it into place. Now, this is the tone arm. This is your tone arm clip. Here's a lever that lifts the tone arm up off the record. Now I've got a protector on my needle right now, so I'm going to show you something. Let's say that you're playing a record like that. If this arm is up in the air, there's no, it's not down on the record. And that's good, because once you lift this up in the air, if someone accidentally hits this, very little chance that your needle will end up shooting and scraping across the vinyl, which would scratch your vinyl, and it also would start to dull your needle a little bit more. So, first bit of advice, whenever you're not playing a record, put the clip on the tone arm so this can't move around and you can't harm your needle. Now I don't mean, if you're in the middle of a set going from record to record, I don't mean put the tone arm clip down every single time. But once you're done a set or whatever, let's say the next person after you is using CDs, I'd put that clip on just to be safe. Or if you're in your own house and practicing, whatnot, you go to the fridge to, or go for a bathroom break, put the clip on. Anyway, so the clip will be on to help protect your arm from swinging around when you're not playing. If you end up turning off your turntable, I would go 2 steps further. First of all, make sure you've got a protector put on your the end of your needle. And secondly, lift that lever up. And that way, like I say, it can't go shooting across and possibly dull the needle. Now, a little hint I'll give you, I've run into this problem a couple times over the years in sets. When you're starting to play, make sure you press down on both your levers so that they're actually all the way down. Because I've had a couple times where basically the tone arm is not all the way down because it's sort of up in the air, someone's hit it or whatever, and my needle is touching but not very heavily, and so I'm getting intermittent, I would get intermittent skipping and whatnot. So when that happens, when you're about to play a song or whatever in the middle of a set, beginning of a set, you think, oh no, did I destroy my needle somehow before I got here? Because most DJs bring their own needles to their shows. Anyway, if you double check to make sure that's pressed down, you won't get caught by that. That's not something that you normally think of. And when you're queuing up your first record and you've got like 2 minutes left before your set starts, you don't want to be dealing with a panic situation like that, trying to figure out what's wrong. Okay, let's take off one of the platters. Here's a slip mat, and it's designed so it's got very little friction as it spins around. Now I'm going to lift the platter off carefully, because you want to be careful with these things. Basically, this round thing is a magnet. Okay. And then you can see that the inside of this, there's no physical connection between this platter and the motor of the turntable. That's because it's not a belt-driven, not a belt-driven turntable. If you have a belt-driven turntable, you'll have an actual pulley, a rubber pulley that attaches. One end is going to be on the bottom of the platter, one end is going to be on the motor. And the reason that's significant, I will explain in a couple minutes. Okay? Now, let me quickly go over my signal flow here. Basically, DJM 600 mixer. I've got the master out set to mono instead of stereo, because even though it's plugged in with both stereo left and right at this end, at my other end, where it's going into the computer, I've only got the right side recording. Okay, so master is going to be on the right side. If you're listening to YouTube in headphones, which might be handy, to hear the cueing versus the mastering a little bit better. Your master signal is going to be in your right earphone. Okay. For left side cueing, whenever these buttons are lit up, your signal is coming through your left headphone, and I've got my headphones split to mono, and I've got my mix balance all the way to the left to the cue side. If I was in a situation where I was DJing in a club with no monitors, or really bad monitors, you can get your master coming through your headphones, and in order to do that, I'd have everything on stereo, and you can use your cue button, and you can use your pan here, and you can go from just cue alone in your left ear to getting a stereo master signal. So that's, like I say, that's a good situation if you're in a club with no monitors. But for right now, I have a good monitor right here beside me, and I'm going to be listening to that. So I'm going to try and keep the levels down very low on that monitor, because I'm using the microphone from the overhead camera to record my voice, and of course it will also record the noise from the monitor at the same time, but I'm also trying to use my master signal directly into the computer for the bed audio track. Okay. One other thing that I'll explain actually right now before we get into cueing a record is the anti-skate. Okay, I'm going to put that on so I don't damage my needle. Basically, if you have, when your turntable, when a record is playing, there is a force being exerted. See, you don't have a straight tone arm. Because of the physics of it, which I won't get into, there's pressure for your tone arm to shoot towards the center of the platter. Now, you'll notice when I'm about to start this, I've got the cover on and I've got a flat CD. If I had a record has, how many grooves do you think are on a record? Well, it depends how many songs are on it, but basically there's one groove per record. It's just a single spiral that keeps going round and round until you're into the center of the record. Okay, so obviously this is going to track through the groove as the record spins and move towards the center anyway. But above and beyond that, see how quickly that moved in there? Now, you can set your anti-skating to different levels, and basically if you've got more anti-skating, it's got more urge to run to the middle. Okay? So that's that demonstration. Now, I'm not going to get into how to set your anti-skating to the proper level, because that's something I'm not really that qualified to tell you, to be honest. I usually set it around to a turntablist. It's very important for them because they are doing scratching, and so there's a lot more tendency for the tone arm to want to jump, the needle to jump out of the groove that you're in, back and forth. Basically, if you're finding your cueing, like let's say we have a record queued up. Okay, so that's where, see what happened there? I've got it at the spot right now. No, I lost it. Okay, right there. See, the thing is, this is wanting to jump out of the groove. It should be that when I go back and forth, it always stays in the center. Now, how do I make that less likely to jump out? Put a little more weight on the front. Okay, see, it's not jumping out there where it was earlier. But I'm not going to play with it that high. If you put too much weight, by moving your weight in towards the center of the tone arm, it allows the front end of your tone arm with the needle to bear down further on the record. And if that happens, you're going to wear your needle out a little bit faster. You're also going to wear your vinyl out a little bit faster. And that's the thing with vinyl records. It's not like a CD that you can play forever and ever because there's no friction. The way this plays is that hard needle is pressing against the vinyl, and there's the way the grooves are set up, it creates vibrations in the needle, and basically this is a microphone. So the vibrations get amplified, sent out to the sound system, but every time that needle is dragging across the vinyl, you're basically wearing down your vinyl. You're making the grooves less obvious all the time. So you can wear a record out quite easily. Okay, so basically to cue a record, yeah, let's get back to that. Okay, if you stop the record, you can leave it there and you know you're at the start of the record. So when you come up later, okay, I immediately noticed that record should be on 45. And that's something that maybe, if you don't know your records well, maybe you should put a big mark on it saying 45 RPM. I wouldn't actually do that. You may want to. The reasons I wouldn't do it is because, number one, once you've gotten used to DJing on vinyl, you get to the point where you hit play, and if it's on the wrong speed, you intuitively know in about a second anyway, so you'll just switch it over. Also, why mark up your records? You may want to keep them kind of pristine for a collector's value. Other people, however, I've known quite a few DJs who they don't want other DJs to know what songs they're playing. So what they'll do is they'll just take a black marker and completely black out the label, and that way another DJ can't come up to you and kind of look over your shoulder and say, hey, that's a good song, I'm going to play that. I'm going to buy that record. Okay, so cueing. Okay, so we've got the needle on the record, and when we're ready to start it, okay, now for the next thing, with pitch control, the pitch control works like the pitch control in a CD player, but if you want to speed up or slow down your record, if you watched my previous video, you'll remember that I was saying that I don't like to touch the side of the platter to slow it down. If you're using a Technics 1200 where it's not driven by a pulley, it shouldn't matter. You can touch the side. So let me just let a record play and I will slow it down a little. So instead of holding your hand up in the air and doing it that way, I find you get more control if you can balance your hand on the deck and then just kind of roll your finger in. Okay? When I learned, I didn't like touching this, so I would always slow the record down this way. There's drawbacks to doing it that way. Number one, you've got to make sure you're hitting this instead of this so your oily fingers don't dirty your record. Number two, if your hands aren't clean, you're sweaty, whatever, it can really grab unexpectedly, and so it's kind of annoying if you're trying to just slow it down and suddenly the record catches and grabs. Not such a big deal if you're only cueing in your headphones, but if you're trying to make a minute adjustment when two records are both playing over the sound system and you accidentally grab it that way and stop the record for a sec, puts them out of sync, dance floor hears it. Not good. So I always used to use the back of my hand and use the back of a fingernail to slow it down, because it's almost impossible to stop a record accidentally with your fingernail because it slides. But as soon as your fingers, the tips of your fingers get greasy, dirty, then it's very easy to stop that. Now, another thing that that I've seen has been a problem too is some clubs I've played in have been really, really hot, very high humidity, and so you'll get that happening a lot sooner. So again, just use this side of the turntable or use the upside down fingernail maybe. I would have to say probably the side of the turntable's the smart choice. And speaking of hot clubs, if you ever get into a really, really warm place, you may find that you'll have sweat dripping off you and hitting the record. And I know that sounds kind of gross. I know it sounds like that's a bad thing, because what happens, you're sitting there watching your record go around, and the tone arm is slowly coming towards this big drop of water that's sitting on your record, and you're worried that it's going to stop your it's going to interrupt, it's going to skip the needle. That usually doesn't happen. Usually it'll actually play right through it, unless you have your settings so light, your tone arm with so little weight on the end. Yeah, it can bump it out, but I haven't found that to be a problem. I've played in a couple of places where it's been so warm in the club and you're in a concrete warehouse or whatever, and the condensation on the ceiling gets so bad, it's dripping constantly, so it's always hitting the equipment and landing on your records. So, you know, you're going to have to deal with adversity. Maybe you're going to be playing outside on a stage and it rains, and you're in, you know, even if you've got a roof on over you on the stage, which is not always the case, it may be that the rain's driving in sideways and hitting your record. So you have to deal with a bit of adversity sometimes. Okay, so that's how I was slowing down records. Now let's you can also speed them up. Now if I'm speeding up a record, I will use the flat hand. Okay, that's the exact motion. So 2 motions you got to learn: speeding up and slowing down. Okay, now while I'm here, I forgot to explain this. You may, as a DJ, you probably won't encounter this, but you may end up at some point playing 45 records. They have a huge hole in the center instead of just this little hole, and that's what this thing is for. It's called a turntable spider, and basically it's cut the right size so that when you put a 45 down, the hole of the 45 matches this perfectly. So try not to lose those if you can. Okay, now groove riding. Once you get good at DJing, as I mentioned in the other video, you'll want to start learning to do groove riding. Same principle applies here, where you can there's more incentive on a vinyl setup to learn to do groove riding than there is on a CD setup. Because when you're making adjustments to your record, it's easier to skip the needle. You can't really skip a needle in a CD player. So if you're going to if you're going to somehow make the needle skip, it's usually when you're making adjustments to the speed, either pushing or slowing. And so you'll kind of intuitively want to learn to do groove riding, because when you're doing groove riding, you're not actually touching the record, cutting back on the amount of skips. Okay, so that's another reason to practice a lot till you get to that point. Let's play a couple songs. New York FM by Breeder, the Van Bellen remix. Okay, that's much too fast. Not surprising considering where it was. That's too slow. I'm using the same method that you should use when you're learning. That's pretty good. This is just a tiny bit too fast. Now I've got to I slowed it down too much. Okay, so that wasn't a very elegant mix, obviously, and it didn't work because there was no bass kicking in right there. But at least the timing was pretty good. Let's try a different one. It's kind of odd trying to mix where you're intentionally not doing things perfectly. Okay, so we'll do this example same way as you should learn when you're learning. Let's not use that side because it's a slow intro. Okay, that's very slow. Too fast. Just a tiny bit too fast. Now, because we know it's going too fast, not only do we have to slow it down, but let's push that down just a tiny bit. Okay, so you saw what I was doing there? Because I think I've got the speed almost right. Instead of just starting on any beat, while I'm trying to get the speed right, I'm waiting for the beginning of the section. 2, 2, 3, 4, 3, 2, 3, 4, 4, 2, 3, 5, 2, 3, 4, 6, 2, 3, 4, 7, 2, 3, 4, 8, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 2, 2, 3, 4, 3, 3, 4, 4, 2, 3, I was waiting for a section when the bass comes back in, but it's not going to happen for a minute, so let's start. Too fast. If you make a big move, always do it either at the start of the first bar of the section or the fifth bar of the section. If you're going to make a big tweak in the EQs, start on the beginning of the first or fifth bar. I got tricked. The bass is going to come in here. See the basics. I don't need to mix a whole bunch of songs. I will try and do a full set here at one point in the next couple of weeks so you can watch a whole bunch of mixing. But for now I'll only do one more example, and this time what I'll do is I will do groove writing. Okay, so as you can see, with a little bit of practice, you can actually mix records sounding pretty decently. Practice when you're beginning. Always just start on that first beat until you get really comfortable understanding whether your incoming record is going too fast or too slow, and then start working on things like trying to catch up records and then doing groove writing, okay? You'll get to the point where eventually you can probably tell the difference between the pitches of two different records if they're off by as little as 1/20th of 1%. You know, if two records are off by half of a beat per minute, then I can usually tell within like 2 seconds. You'll get good at that. I know it's really frustrating when you're beginning, but everybody gets better with practice. Okay, the only other things I would say is I've occasionally seen DJs under pressure. They're about to put a new record on, they don't know where the sleeve is for the old record, and they'll just plop another record on top and start playing it. I would not recommend doing that, for the simple reason that when you've got two records here, if you're cueing like this, they're going to be slipping over top of each other because there's not enough friction between the two of them. And if that happens, you're going to slightly wear out both of your records. So it's not good for your records. I guess, in theory, if you are the type that puts the needle down and you do absolutely all of your mix, you do your cueing by holding both records at once, and once it starts, you'd groove ride instead of playing with records. I guess you're not going to ruin your records that quickly, but why bother? It's just a practice you don't need to get into. The other thing that I would recommend is that if you're playing a set and you're coming on after another DJ, let's say this is his record or her record, treat their records really well with respect. If you can, figure out where their sleeve is. Usually the DJ will leave the empty sleeves kind of like this in their crate, and so what you can do is actually put the record away for them. When they come back to the decks, if they've had to step away for a minute, you can point out that the record's back in its sleeve. Worst case, if you can't figure out where to put it, don't just set it down on the table, whatever. Use one of your white sleeves and put it there so that it's easy to see, because the white sleeves are easier to see in a dark booth. And that way, you know, you're not ruining their record, you're not likely to scratch it up. Okay, that's all I have to say. So thanks for watching. Like I say, if you watch this without watching the beat mixing on CDs video first, go back and watch that. You'll understand a lot more of this. And I will try to do a full hour-long mix here at some point in the next week or so you can actually watch me a lot more if you're kind of interested in the dynamics of mixing. Cool, thanks for watching.